The house stood like a monument to perfection, glass, marble, and steel arranged with such precision that it felt less like a home and more like a statement. From the outside, it radiated success. Every surface gleamed, every window reflected, a world that admired it. But inside, beneath the polished floors and curated art, there was a silence that didn't belong to peace. It was heavier than that. It lingered in the hallways, settled into the corners, and wrapped itself around everything like an unspoken truth no one dared to name. She moved through that silence with purpose. Her heels clicked softly against the marble, each step measured. Controlled, deliberate. She had built this world from nothing. Every inch of it earned through discipline, sacrifice, and an unwavering belief that control was the only way to survive. People called her strong. They called her brilliant. Some even called her untouchable. And maybe she was. But strength has a way of hardening into something else when left unchecked. Something colder. Something that mistakes protection for possession. At the far end of the hallway, a door remained slightly open. Inside, laughter, soft, delicate, almost fragile, drifted into the corridor. It was the only sound in the house that felt alive. Her daughters. She paused there, just outside the room, listening. Not entering. Not announcing herself. Just listening. The girls sat on the floor, their fingers tracing the edges of a puzzle spread between them. They worked slowly, carefully, piecing together a world they could not see but somehow understood more deeply than most ever would. Their movements were precise, guided by touch and memory and something more, something intuitive, almost instinctual. They didn't need sight to navigate their reality. They had learned to feel it. "Do you think it's a bird?" one of them asked softly, her fingers lingering over a curved edge. "No," the other replied, tilting her head slightly as if listening to the shape itself. "It feels bigger, like something that moves slowly." Their voices carried a quiet confidence, a shared language built not on what they saw, but on what they sensed. They were intelligent, perceptive, and deeply aware in ways the world often underestimated. And yet, despite all that awareness, they lived within walls that had been carefully constructed around them, not just physical ones, but invisible boundaries drawn by a mother who feared the world more than they did. She stepped away from the door without making a sound. Back in the hallway, the silence returned immediately, swallowing the laughter as if it had never existed. She reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen for just a second before tapping it awake. A grid appeared. Small, perfectly aligned rectangles filled the display, each one a different angle of the house. The kitchen, the living room, the staircase, the bedrooms, even the hallway she had just walked through. Every space accounted for. Every movement captured. Her eyes scanned the screens with practiced precision. There they were, her daughters, visible now not through the doorway, but through a camera mounted discreetly in the corner of their room. The angle was perfect. Wide enough to see everything, subtle enough to remain unnoticed. She watched them for a moment longer, her expression unreadable. To her, this was care. This was responsibility. The world was unpredictable, dangerous, full of risks she could not control. But this system, this network of silent watchers, embedded into the walls, this gave her certainty. It gave her the illusion that nothing could happen without her knowing, that nothing could go wrong. Her thumb moved again, switching feeds. Another room, another angle, another confirmation that everything was exactly where it should be. Safe. The word echoed in her mind, but it didn't feel as solid as it once had. Because beneath the comfort of knowing, there was something else, something quieter, harder to ignore. a question that had begun to take shape in the spaces between her thoughts. If this is safety, why does it feel so much like watching? And deeper still, why did it feel like something was being taken away, not protected? She locked the phone and slipped it back into her pocket, the glow of the screens disappearing instantly, leaving her alone again in the vast, silent house. Somewhere behind her, the girls laughed again. And somewhere within the walls, unseen and unheard, the cameras continued to watch. Night settled over the house like a second skin, smoothing out the edges of the day until everything felt distant, muted, almost unreal. The lights dimmed automatically, casting soft pools of gold across the marble floors, while the rest of the mansion dissolved into shadow. It was in these hours, when the world slowed, when even the silence seemed to deepen, that he arrived. No one ever noticed him. That was part of the job. He entered through the service door at the side of the house, keys in hand, movements, quiet and practiced. His uniform was simple, slightly worn at the edges, but clean. He didn't carry the weight of the house the way its owner did. He carried something else, something heavier in its own way, but softer too. Responsibility, not control. Love, not fear. He paused just inside the doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. For a brief moment, he stood still, listening. The house had a rhythm at night, a hum beneath the silence, air vents whispering, distant ticking of a clock, and sometimes, if you paid attention, the faintest traces of life behind closed doors. Then he moved. Room by room, he worked methodically. Wiping surfaces that were already spotless, adjusting things no one would notice had been touched. It wasn't really about cleaning, not in a place like this. It was about maintaining perfection, keeping the illusion intact. But he saw what others didn't. It started with small things. A chair slightly out of place, not because someone had moved it carelessly, but because someone had been feeling their way around it. A glass set down just a little too far from the edge of a table. The faint indentation of fingers tracing along the wall. He recognized those signs. His daughter did the same thing at home. He could picture her now, sitting cross-legged on the floor of their small apartment, humming softly as she arranged her toys in careful, deliberate patterns. She didn't need much, just space, trust, the freedom to explore without someone constantly stepping in. He swallowed that thought and kept moving. The staircase led him upward into the quieter parts of the house. Bedrooms, hallways, places where the silence felt different, not empty, but watchful. He reached the landing and paused, something catching his attention. A small black dot tucked neatly into the corner of the ceiling. At first glance, it looked like part of the design. Subtle, intentional, but he knew better. He stepped closer, tilting his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. It wasn't just one. There was another across the hallway, and another near the door at the far end. All positioned with precision. All angled just right. Cameras. He felt a faint shift in his chest. Not shock exactly, but something colder. Recognition. He had seen security systems before. That wasn't unusual in homes like this. But this was different. These weren't placed at entrances or obvious points of access. They were everywhere. Watching spaces that didn't need watching. Watching people who couldn't even see them. He exhaled slowly, stepping back, his gaze moving from one lens to the next. For a moment, he imagined what it would feel like to exist in a space where every movement, every gesture, every quiet moment was being observed, not protected. Observed. He continued down the hallway, more aware now, more attentive. The feeling followed him, a subtle unease that settled just beneath the surface. He reached the door to the girls' room and stopped, not touching it, just listening. Inside, there was no laughter this time, only quiet voices. "Do you feel that?" one of them whispered. A pause. Yeah, the other replied softly. Like, someone's here, but not really here. He felt his chest tighten. They couldn't see the cameras, but somehow, they knew. He stepped back from the door, careful not to make a sound. His eyes lifted instinctively, scanning the corner above the frame. Another camera. Watching. Always watching. He turned away slowly, continuing his work, but something had changed. The house no longer felt just silent. It felt aware. Like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And as he moved through the shadows, one thought lingered, refusing to leave him alone. If this was meant to keep them safe, why did it feel so wrong? Morning didn't arrive with noise. It slipped into the house quietly, like everything else did, stretching thin lines of light across the floors and walls without disturbing the stillness that had settled overnight. The mansion woke the same way it slept, controlled, composed, perfectly arranged. But inside the girls' room, something else was waking. They were already sitting near the window, though neither of them could see the pale gold light spilling through it. Still, they leaned toward it instinctively, as if their bodies understood warmth in a way their eyes never could. One of them ran her fingers slowly along the edge of the windowsill, tracing the faint grooves in the wood like she had done 100 times before. "It feels different today," she murmured. Her sister tilted her head slightly, listening, not to sound, but to the absence of it. "Yeah," she said after a moment. "Quieter, but not the good kind." There was a pause, delicate and heavy all at once. "You ever feel like—" The first one hesitated, searching for words that didn't quite exist, like the house is watching us? The question hung in the air, fragile but undeniable. Her sister didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out, her hand finding the other's without effort. Their fingers intertwined, grounding each other in something real. "I don't think it's the house," she said softly. "It's something in it." A faint chill moved through the room, not from the air, but from the truth settling between them. They had learned to trust their instincts early. When sight isn't an option, you develop something else. Something sharper. You listen differently. You feel differently. You notice shifts that others overlook. The way footsteps pause just a second too long, the way silence can suddenly feel crowded. And lately, the silence had been crowded. Downstairs, their mother stood in the kitchen, her movements precise as always. The coffee machine hummed softly, filling the space with a rich, familiar scent. Everything was exactly where it should be. Everything was under control. She reached for her phone. The screen lit up instantly, revealing the same grid of quiet surveillance. Her eyes moved from one feed to another, checking, confirming, ensuring. And there they were, her daughters, sitting by the window, their faces calm, unaware, or at least that's what she believed. She watched them for a moment longer than usual, something about the way they sat, the stillness of their bodies. It felt different, not relaxed, not careless, intentional, as if they were listening. Her grip on the phone tightened slightly, though her expression remained unchanged. She told herself it was nothing. Just a feeling. Just her mind filling in gaps that didn't exist. They were safe. That's what mattered. Upstairs, the girls shifted slightly, as if responding to something unseen. "Do you ever feel like we're not alone?" The first one asked again, her voice quieter now. "We're never alone," the second replied. "Mom's always around." "No, not like that." She shook her head, her fingers pressing lightly against the floor. "I mean, like someone's watching us." Even when she's not here. The words landed differently this time. Her sister went still. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then slowly, she turned her face upward. Not toward anything visible, but toward a feeling. Toward something just beyond understanding. "I think," she whispered, "they don't trust us." The realization was soft, but it carried weight far beyond its volume, because trust isn't something you can see, but you can feel when it's missing. Downstairs, the mother's thumb hovered over the screen again. She zoomed in slightly on the camera feed, focusing closer on their faces, searching for something, a sign, a reassurance. But the more she looked, the more distant they seemed, not physically, emotionally. She lowered the phone slowly, a faint crease forming between her brows. For the first time, a thought crossed her mind that she didn't immediately push away. What if they feel this? What if they know? Upstairs, the girls sat in silence again, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with awareness, with questions, with something that had begun to take shape, even if they couldn't fully name it yet. They couldn't see the cameras, but somehow, they could feel the eyes. He moved through the hallway with his usual routine, cloth in hand, steps soft against the polished floor. But now, every corner he passed, every ceiling he glanced at, carried a presence he couldn't ignore. The cameras weren't just objects anymore. They had weight, intention. He stopped beneath one again, pretending to wipe the wall, his eyes lifting just slightly, watching, always watching. His jaw tightened. For a moment, he said nothing, did nothing. Just stood there, caught, between two worlds, the one where he kept his head down, finished his shift, went home to his child, and the one where he stepped in, said something, changed something. The first world was safe, the second one wasn't. He turned away, continuing down the hallway, but the thought followed him like a shadow. What kind of father would he be if he ignored this? He entered the kitchen, the scent of polished wood and cold air surrounding him. Everything was perfect, untouched, controlled. And yet, all he could think about was those girls upstairs. How they sat, how they spoke, how they felt something they couldn't see. They weren't just being watched, they were being caged, quietly. His hands slowed as he wiped the counter. A memory surfaced, his child laughing freely at home, running without fear, asking questions, making mistakes, growing, not being monitored, not being controlled, trusted. That word hit harder than anything else. He placed the cloth down for a moment, exhaling deeply. This wasn't his house, not his place, not his decision. But it felt wrong. And sometimes, wrong doesn't. Stay quiet. He picked the cloth back up, but something inside him had shifted. The line he had been standing on, the one between silence and action, was starting to blur. Because now it wasn't just about a job. It was about what he was willing to accept, and what he wasn't. He tried to ignore it. For the first few days, he told himself it wasn't his place. People with money lived differently. They had their own ways, their own fears, their own rules. Who was he to question that? He had a job to do, a child to go home to. Responsibilities that didn't leave room for unnecessary risks. But the house wouldn't let him forget. Every night, the same routine, the same silence, the same feeling of being watched from angles no one should have to think about. And every time he passed their door, he slowed down, just enough to listen. Their voices were softer now, more careful. "I think it's still there," one of them whispered one evening. A pause. "Yeah," the other replied. "It doesn't go away." He stood frozen in the hallway, heart beating a little faster than it should. They felt it, not with their eyes, but with something deeper, something honest. That night, he didn't go straight back to work. Instead, he walked slowly to the far end of the corridor, where the shadows stretched longer and the cameras seemed just a little more hidden. He looked up again, this time not pretending, studying, thinking. His mind ran through possibilities. Confronting the mother? Impossible. He'd be gone in seconds. Ignoring it? That option was slipping away more with each passing night. Then something else surfaced. Not loud, not dramatic, simple. What if he didn't fight it directly, but changed what it saw? The idea stayed with him as he moved through the house. Small adjustments, barely noticeable. A chair shifted just enough to block a clear angle. A decorative object repositioned. A lamp turned slightly. Nothing obvious, nothing that would raise suspicion, but enough to create gaps, moments, breathing space. The next night, he went a little further. While cleaning near the girls' room, he tapped lightly on the door, just once, then stepped away, leaving it slightly more open than before. Not enough to be questioned, just enough to change the air in the room. Inside, silence. Then, "Did you feel that?" one of them asked. "Yeah," the other whispered. "It's different." He didn't stay. He didn't need to. For the first time, he felt it too. A shift. It wasn't rebellion, not yet. It was something quieter, more careful, but it mattered. Because sometimes the smallest changes are the ones that break control the most. As he walked away, one thought settled firmly in his mind. If he couldn't stop the cameras, he would make sure they didn't see everything. The following nights became a careful dance. He moved silently through the mansion, adjusting, shifting, creating small blind spots the mother would never notice. A plant here, a painting slightly angled there, a door left ajar just enough to change the view. Each subtle adjustment felt like a rebellion, small but significant. And with each movement, he imagined the girls, finally breathing in a space that wasn't entirely under watch. Upstairs, the girls noticed it too. They didn't know why or even what had changed, but something in the air felt softer, freer. Their whispered conversations grew bolder. "Do you feel it?" one asked, brushing her fingers along the carpet as if it carried invisible waves of protection. "I think maybe someone's helping us." He lingered outside their door one night, listening to their quiet laughter ripple through the room. He couldn't see them, but the sound was enough, proof that his small actions were working. He allowed himself a rare smile, one that didn't hide behind masks or routines. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope, not for himself, but for them. Downstairs, he caught glimpses of the mother through the monitors. She moved with the same precision, the same intensity, unaware of the changes subtly eroding. Her complete control. And yet, he didn't feel fear, not anymore. He understood something crucial. Control could be challenged without confrontation. It could be softened without a word. It could be stolen through presence and care, invisible, but profound. One evening, as he polished the floors near the main staircase, he realized that what he was doing wasn't just protecting them, it was teaching them something essential. That even when the world watches, even when people try to cage you, there are invisible hands willing to guide, to shield, to create freedom in quiet ways. A strange calm settled over him. He wasn't just a janitor in a mansion. He was a guardian, a quiet force in the background, shaping space without stepping into the spotlight. And in that quiet work, he felt the weight of responsibility and the exhilaration of courage all at once. The house, which had once felt suffocating, now breathed differently. Every subtle change, every unnoticed shift, carried a new rhythm. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Because small acts of courage, once taken, ripple far beyond the eye or camera that tries to contain them. And soon, everything was going to change. The tension in the house had become almost tangible. Each night he moved with a precision born of necessity, every step measured, every adjustment deliberate. He no longer thought of himself as just a janitor. He was something else now, a quiet disruptor, a guardian of unseen freedoms. The girls' laughter grew richer, bolder, their voices carrying a confidence that hadn't been there before. And though they didn't know why, they felt it. Someone was finally on their side. The mother's behavior began to shift too, not dramatically, but in subtle ways. She lingered longer at the cameras, checking feeds more often, sensing something amiss but unable to pinpoint it. Her control, once absolute, was now challenged by the invisible interventions of a man she dismissed as harmless. And that small crack, almost imperceptible, made all the difference. One night, the janitor paused outside the girl's door, listening. He heard a question neither girl had asked before, a hint of curiosity and wonder. "Do you think anyone really cares what happens to us?" A beat. "Yes," the other replied. "I think someone does." He allowed himself a quiet sigh. That single exchange, simple as it was, carried more weight than any confrontation or argument could. The girls were beginning to feel the world differently, not as a cage, but as a space where care and courage could exist quietly, invisibly, and powerfully. Later, he sat on the back steps of the mansion, staring into the night. The moonlight fell across the manicured lawn, illuminating the house in an almost ethereal glow. For the first time, he saw the mansion not as a symbol of wealth or control, but as a stage for transformation. Every act of subtle defiance, every gentle intervention was reshaping lives in ways the mother could not comprehend. He thought about his own child, about the power of small, quiet actions to protect and nurture. The parallels were undeniable. The house was no longer just a workplace. It had become a lesson in courage, in empathy, in the strength of doing what was right, even when no one would ever know. And then it hit him. The ultimate act wouldn't be one of confrontation. It would be one of revelation. One that would expose the truth of the cameras, the control, and the unseen guardianship that had been quietly growing. He knew the moment would come soon, and when it did, it would shake the foundation of the mansion and the illusions of the mother's authority. Until that night, he would continue to move silently, shaping freedom where he could, protecting the girls in ways that could never be documented or rewarded. The quiet had already become a storm, and when it broke, nothing would ever be the same. The first crack had appeared, and the rest of the house would follow. The night finally arrived when the invisible walls he had been building reached their limit. The mansion, once a place of cold control and silent surveillance, now vibrated, with a tension that could no longer be contained. He had spent weeks preparing, not for confrontation, but for revelation. Every subtle shift, every carefully left open door, every repositioned object had been a quiet act of defiance, and tonight, the truth would emerge. He waited outside the girls' room, listening as their soft voices echoed through the hall. They were talking about the world, imagining places they had never seen, daring to dream aloud in a way they hadn't before. It was beautiful and fragile, and he knew this moment was worth everything. With a deep breath, he stepped inside, carefully, turning the cameras away as he passed. No one would see what he was about to do, but that didn't matter. What mattered was freeing them from the invisible cage. The mother appeared in the doorway, startled. Her eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and anger. "What are you doing?" she demanded, voice sharp. But he didn't answer. He simply gestured. To the cameras, to the corners, to the angles that had monitored her daughter's every move. And then he let her see. The girls, unafraid, laughing, exploring their room freely for the first time. Her shock was absolute. The control she had, clung to for years, the belief that surveillance was safety, crumbled before her eyes. The girls reached out, touching the objects and spaces she had tried to contain, unaware of the power struggle that had silently unfolded around them. And in that moment, she understood, not just the loss of control, but the strength of the Yae, quiet courage that had given her children a chance at freedom. The janitor stood back, silent, letting the revelation speak for itself. He had risked everything, not for recognition, not for reward, but for the simple, radical act of protecting innocence in a world that often overlooked it. And as the mother's anger softened into comprehension, he realized something profound. Power is not measured by wealth, by cameras, or by control. It is measured by what you are willing to do to protect what truly matters. The girls hugged him, their laughter now fearless, unconstrained. And as he stepped out into the cool night air, he understood the full impact of his choices. The mansion had been a prison, the cameras a symbol of fear, but courage, quiet and steady, had transformed it into something entirely different. The house of silence had become a house of liberation, and the world inside it had changed forever. That night, he walked away knowing that true heroism rarely comes with recognition. It comes in the spaces unseen, in the acts that matter most, to those who cannot defend themselves. And in the end, that is a power far greater than any fortune, far stronger than any control, an invisible force that leaves the world irrevocably better than it found it.